Hey guys, Quiff the Lazy Geek here and welcome back to the channel. Today I am super excited because I get to test some more equipment, and yeah, I always get excited about astrophotography equipment. So I received recently this black box, and as you would expect in this massive black box, there is something else. And what this was is this mount, which is a harmonic drive or strain wave gear mount. This is the WarpAstron WD-20 mount, and it was sent to me directly for review by WarpAstron. I will have to return it after the review period, and I am not being paid anything for this review. So all of my opinions, etc., as always, they are my own. I will point out the good stuff and what I don't like about the mount, as well as I always do in my videos. So what is this mount? What makes it so special? And why would you choose it over something more mainstream like the AM5? Because I love featuring stuff that is not mainstream on the channel, but that is something else. So what's very special about this mount is several things. It is the fact that it is using type 20 strain wave gear or harmonic drive, meaning that this mount, which weighs 5.4 kilograms, basically the same or even slightly lighter than the ZW AM5, it can carry 22 kilograms of equipment at 20 centimeters from the axis of rotation with no counterweight, which is absolutely insane. You can probably use something like a 140 or 50 millimeters aperture refractor with this with no issue. You can use a C11 with this with no issue. It says this is a beast, and it is without counterweight, right? That's absolutely amazing. And a second specificity or a second characteristic of this mount is that it does not use stepper motors. It uses instead direct drive servo motors. And so the advantage of that is to apparently reduce the imprecision that comes with stepper motors, because stepper motors, there's no feedback loop about has the step been or even the micro step being exactly the rotation that we have expected. We don't know because we don't measure it. Servo motors, they used encoders to verify the rotation of the servo motor. And when I say encoders, and when you see encoders in the description of this mount, I'll have all of the links, of course, down in the description. We mean encoders that let the servo motors work as expected. I don't mean things like Renishaw high-quality encoders like you would see in astrophysics mounts or in 10 micro mounts or in the Ioptron EC series of mounts. Those are like absolute encoders, and they're not quite the same as what's in there. But what we get with that, according to WarpAstron, and it is something we are going to test in this video, is we get via direct drive and servo motors, we get zero backlash, zero declination backlash, super precise guiding because we can react to deviations immediately, and all the while we're supporting a crazy payload without needing counterweight. And on the website, by the way, there is a chart that is available to tell you, like, okay, how far from the center of rotation is your equipment, center of gravity, how heavy is your equipment, and can it be mounted on this? And then you see exactly what's possible. They have two values, the maximum weight, which is 22 kilos at 20 centimeters, or the standard weight, so more kind of the recommended weight, which is actually 18 kilograms at 20 centimeters without counterweight. Without counterweight, that's amazing. In terms of the outside of the mount, we have a dual dovetail at the top, which supports both Vixen and Los Mendes style dovetails with very nice knobs to tighten that. We also have all of the polar alignment adjustments as we would expect, and those come also with locking screws. So we have locking screws for the altitude and for the azimuth. And one thing that I noticed when I was doing polar alignment with the mount is that as I was locking the locking screws, there was no bump in the polar alignment, no change that I could really see. Whereas for any other mount that I've used, whenever I was tightening the knobs, my polar alignment got slightly off. This is not the case with this one, at least with the sample that I have received. It also has some bubble levels that are available here. And at the front of the mount, you have an array of ports. You have the on-off button, you have the power port, you have the ST4 port, which you should never use, but you can use it with the remote controller that is provided with it. And you have the USB-C controller, which is going to be used by my StellarMate Pro, because that's what I used to control the mount, or it could be your Astro PC, or it could be your ASI Air. This is via this port that you're going to be controlling this mount. Oh, and we also have a home button there, which lets you like force the mount to go back to home position if you're having trouble with the controller. But overall, this is a very streamlined package that is very satisfying to use mechanically. I'll be showing you how it looks like once it is mounted on a tripod. I'll be mounting it on the CT40 or TC40 tripod that I've been using for my AM5. And to mount it, you'll of course have to basically mount something on the base of the mount. There are the specifications on their website, so if you want to learn more about exactly how you can mount this mount onto a tripod, then you should go and check the link down in the description. And for me, I just used the plate that came with the TC40 tripod, and I was just able to attach it without any issue directly. Basically, it was completely compatible with the ZW-AM5 mounting system, so no problem there. Now, before I put this mount on my tripod and then I put the equipment on top, you're wondering how much does this cost? And yes, it is not cheap. It is, the official price is $3,200 basically. And I think at various retailers, you can find it for $3,000, which is more expensive, obviously, than something like the AM5 by the ZW, but then it uses different drive technology and it has a much higher payload without counterweight. So if you need that, that's definitely important. And you could be willing to spend the additional amount of money. I'll be showing you also later in the video, but this mount is absolutely silent. While it is slewing, you cannot hear anything. So if you're worried about your neighbors or anything like that, like I am worried about my neighbors, and you're worried that the sound of the mounts could disturb them, this does not make any noise, and I am not exaggerating. It is completely and perfectly silent. It is a ninja mount. It's the first time I've seen this. It is absolutely incredible how silent it is. But anyway, let me put it on the tripod, put my Newtonian on top so I can show you how the test setup that I've used looks like. And after I show you that, we'll go into the pros and cons of the mechanics aspects of the mount. I'll touch a little bit about the driver of the mount and the hand controller, and then we'll go into the actual results of my guiding tests and my imaging tests with the mount. So make sure to stay tuned to see how that looks like. And while you're at it, you may go down below, like the video, leave a comment, subscribe, join the channel, join my Patreon. All of that is down below, but you can also stay online and watch the rest. So see you once this is assembled. So here we have the mount in its test configuration. So this is how I've been testing it across a couple of weeks now. And so it is mounted on the TC40 tripod that is made normally for the ZW-AM5 mount, but there was no problem mounting it on it. And on top of the mount, we have my 150 millimeters aperture Newtonian telescope from Skywatcher. And this is controlled by the StellarMate Pro that I have reviewed on the channel recently. I'll put the links above and also down in the description. So the StellarMate Pro is connected via USB directly to the mount to control it. The mount also has its own Wi-Fi hotspot, which I believe can also be used to control it. I haven't tested that feature. And the mount is also powered directly from the StellarMate Pro as well. So everything goes through the StellarMate Pro. But for my protocol of testing, obviously, I decided to go with a very common guiding software, which is PhD2, rather than the default software that is used in the StellarMate 2. PhD2 is also installed by default on the StellarMate. So I was just able to run it without any issues to be able to see how the mount was going to perform. And the mount basically hopped from on a couple of targets every night for the past week, a bit over a week now. And so we've gathered a lot of PhD2 guide logs that we'll have a look in a moment. I also ran the PhD2 calibration assistant, which also measures the declination backlash on the mount. And because it's advertised as zero backlash, this is something that we are going to be able to check. I mean, I'm sure it's already wrong because zero can never be attained, but let's see if it's close enough that it can be considered as zero. I'd also like to point out that I did polar align the mount very precisely using the polar alignment routine that is in the StellarMate Pro, which is pretty much the same routine that you have in the ASI Air, in SharpCap, or in Nina. It's very intuitive and very easy to use. On the topic of polar alignment, as I believe I mentioned earlier in the video, the locking knobs that we have for the altitude here and for the azimuth here, they are on both sides of the mount, so you can only see like the sides available to this field of view that you have right now. But those are really good. When I lock them in, I didn't see any significant change in the polar alignment. This is normally something that I'm very careful about, and even on something as high quality as the AM5, when I was locking the bolts, I could see the polar alignment kind of switching a little bit, and I was like, never mind. But here, when I lock them, I don't know if it's my mount sample, if it's true for all of the mount samples for this particular model, but like the polar alignment was pretty stable before locking and after locking, so I was really impressed by that. The rest of the polar alignment, so using this lever here to control the altitude and these screws to control the azimuth, was, as expected. It's very similar to other mounts that I've tested, like the AM5 as well. It's very functional. It works very well. You do need to be very smooth and small moves LE before you can get to the correct polar alignment, so you just need to be cognizant of that. And otherwise, another thing that jumped to me while I was mounting my telescope onto the mount is I really like the nubs that they use for the dovetail plate here, which supports both Vixen and Losmandy type plates. It's exactly the same nub as they use here, but this is really good because you can really have a lot of lever effect on the nub, and I find it much better than those slightly indented roundish nubs. I find those so much easier to tighten in a way that I know the telescope is nice and secure onto the mount. It's those small details that really can make a big difference. And it's in this area that I really like this mount, because it does pay attention to details, from those knobs on the dovetail plate to everything being super smooth to turn, to the locking knobs not bumping the polar alignment, and also to the fact that while the mount is slewing, it can be slewing at full speed, it is completely and utterly silent. And to give you an idea of that silence, I'm just gonna go ahead and slew the mount. You'd expect some noise, something, right? It is utterly silent. I barely hear anything, even if I press my ear down to the mount. It's absolutely insane. Nothing, no noise. If I'm not looking at the mount, even if I'm standing right next to it, I would have no idea that it is slewing. So this is a huge advantage if you're in the city and you're in next to buildings, or you have neighbors that are very close to you, like I do, and you don't want the noise of the slewing to disturb them. This is amazing because there is no noise, no sound whatsoever. I cannot hear anything, and I find that absolutely amazing. Now, this is a good moment to also tell you about the hand paddle, or the controller that comes with the mount. This is something that I would rarely, if ever, use, so it's not something that's very important to me, because I'd basically always been using the mount via the StellarMate Pro, or if you're using the ASI Air, most likely you'd always be using the mount via the ASI Air, and if you're using Nina, same thing, and if you're using Sequence Generator Pro, same thing, of Voyager, same thing. But this is the paddle, and the paddle is functional. There are only like the north, south, east, west buttons to move the mount, F1 and F2 to basically change the speed of the slewing of the mount and of the guiding of the mount, and you can also turn it off. And the center button lets you access the menu effectively. And with this controller, you can perform a few things, change settings about horizon limits, about altitude limits, which is set, I believe, to 88 degrees by default to avoid a long telescope colliding with the tripod. I immediately changed it to 90 degrees. I believe you can also set the meridian limits, and you can recalibrate the home position, all of the good stuff. There's some weird terminology used on the paddle. There's basically 4 lines of text. It's very difficult to see in the sunlight, so I'm not gonna show that, but the slew rate somehow is called guide rate, and then the guide rate is called pulse guide rate. So that got me a bit confused for quite a while, and I hope they can fix that in a firmware update. So yeah, guide rate equals slew rate, pulse guide rate equals guide rate. Yeah, so some terminology things that are a bit funky there. And talking about funky things, I want to mention as well the control software drivers for the mount. This mount is controlled by an open source mount controller called OnStep, which is compatible with a control protocol that is built by, or at least used by Mead for quite a while, which is the LX200 protocol. It's a very respectable, very well-established protocol, so it works really well. But the default options in the driver, whether it is the ASCOM driver or the Indy driver that is used on the StellarMate Pro, concerning the meridian window, are a bit distressing. So OnStep has this weird behavior that I believe was built to support like old imaging control software that was not really good at doing meridian flips, where you can define a window around the meridian, like before the meridian and after the meridian, during which you can slew to somewhere in that window, but you're not able to sync and slew again while you're in that window. You can only track. It's weird restrictions there. And so one of the first things, so that caused me frustration for the first few nights. And one of the first things you should do is set the east limit, the east meridian limit, to 0, and then set the west meridian limit to something like 10 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever is good for you in terms of not having your scope heat your tripod. But besides that, like in terms of the driver control of the mount, everything is fine. I just didn't like that the default meridian window settings that were set to basically 1 hour east and 1 hour west for a huge meridian window, that really caused issues for me when I was trying to point to and plate solve and center an object that was in that window, and I could not understand why it was not working, and it was all due to that setting. So that's a weird default setting, but at least it's just something that you can switch and change in 10 seconds. Still, it was something that made for an awkward first few nights in terms of testing. And this is also something that I hope WarpAstron changes with their mount. One of the other things about my testing methodology, by the way, is this comes nowhere near the payload that is accepted by that mount, which is 22 kilograms at 20 centimeters from the axis of rotation, without needing any counterweight, which I find completely mind-boggling. So keep that in mind. But I have all of those PhD 2 kind of statistics, so let's have a look at them. But before we do that, let me tell you how much work it was to put this video together. And that work, all of my videos are only possible thanks to you. Yes, you watching the videos. So if you want to really support the channel and help me keep making such videos and in-depth reviews of equipment, click that like button, leave a comment, let me know what you think of the video, of the mount. It really is the only way that YouTube will broaden the reach of my videos. And if you're feeling particularly generous, you can join my channel as a member or join my Patreon. Link is down in the description. It makes an incredible difference, and it is thanks to you guys that I can keep going. So you guys truly make the channel possible. Thank you so much. And if you're a YouTube member or a Patreon supporter, you will have your name in video credits for any video that is longer than 20 minutes. And if you're a Patreon on some ranks, you'll have access to my videos early and without ads. So if that sounds interesting to you and you want to support the channel, definitely do that. And if you aren't able to support the channel like that, you can use any of my links in the description, like Amazon, Agena Astro, all of those links. If you buy something after clicking those links, so if you're planning to buy anything on Amazon, just like click on the links below, buy something, and I'll get a small tiny commission. Anyway, with that, let's go and have a look at the test results. Okay, I am now on my computer where I have the results of my investigation into the guiding performance of the mount. Before I get started, I have to say that pretty much all of the exposures that I took with the mount had pinpoint stars, except on one night where I had winds of something like 10 meters per second. So obviously with such winds, even a mount such as this will have issues, especially I think on the TC40 tripod, which I think is well known as being the weak point of the AM5. So I kind of wish I had a better tripod for this test. So I had to wait for a night with much less wind to be able to get proper results. But with that out of the way, saying that the proof is in the pudding and the exposures actually look good and my stars are pinpoint sharp, that actually tells you all of the information that you need. But let's get into the details because you guys are nerds, I'm a geek, we are geeks, we are nerds, yeah, let's go! So I am on my computer right now, and this is basically the results of the calibration assistant with PhD2. So again, running on my StellarMate Pro, and this is through an off-axis guider, right? So all of my guiding results are done via an off-axis guider, so you get the full 517 millimeters of focal length on the guiding figures, which I think is quite important. Now in this calibration assistant in PhD2 gets you a lot of information, and it doesn't tell you the whole story in this case because I didn't run it long enough, for instance, to get a proper right ascension peak-to-peak figure. I'll show you some more charts across a longer period of time with where we can properly see that peak-to-peak figure. We see some really good guiding results, and we also see that the polar alignment that I had using the StellarMate Pro polar alignment routine was very, very close to being an excellent polar alignment with just basically 0.5 arc minutes away from polar alignment. But more important than all of that, we can validate that the advertised zero backlash of the mount is actually true. And this is the first time that I can say that for any mount that I have ever tested, owned, or reviewed. It is, as you can see here, 46 milliseconds. This is absolutely nothing. It basically literally means zero backlash. That's absolutely amazing when you want to basically catch up with sharp changes in your guiding. It can catch up immediately, and that's crazy. And let me share with you the actual backlash results, the screenshot with the backlash results. And you can see in red is the measured backlash results. In white is the ideal backlash results. They basically overlap. I have never seen that with any mount that I've ever had, including my, I wish I had never sold it mount, which was the Vixen SXD2, including with my SEM60, including with the AM5, including with my EQ6R, including with my AZ EQ5. All of my mounts, none of them have had this result. And so obviously, I did that on basically one of the first nights I tested the scope, and I was completely floored by how good this looks. Normally, you would see like those red points, basically they keep horizontal for a while, and that's the backlash. And then finally they slope downwards. But here it's immediate, and it is super impressive. And to illustrate how that looks like in real life, and so that's super impressive. But what does that mean in real life? It means that any declination corrections that you may need, any abrupt declination change for whatever reason can be corrected very, very quickly. To give you an example, I was like looking at my guiding on one of the nights that I was testing the mount, and I saw this spike of declination. I have no idea the reason for that. It could have been like a gust of wind. It could have been something else. So it's not like I'm not guaranteed that, the lack of declination backlash is the only reason why we resolved this so quickly. But you can see a single guide pulse in declination took care of it. Nothing more, just a single guide pulse, and we were golden. And looking at my graph logs, looking at PhD2 log viewers across many hours, something that I really noticed with this mount is not only was the RMS figures quite low in general, something like 0.4 on good nights to 0.8 on bad seeing nights, maybe even 1 arc seconds on a bad seeing night with wind, but that's kind of expected. But beyond the RMS measurement was the consistency of the curves. There are very few, if any, outliers. And if there is an outlier, it gets squashed. Like the nail that stands out calls the hammer. And you can see this is another example of a session that I was like looking at live and being quite impressed with basically how consistent the guiding results are. It's like pretty much everything is squashed between +1 and -1, and most of the time they're even between plus 0.5 or 0.6 and minus 0.5, 0.6. It's just super consistent. You don't really have any outliers except like this one for whatever reason, but you can see it's resolved immediately. And I do believe it was like a gust of wind or something like that. Okay, so that's all well and good, but what about periodic error on the right ascension axis? And what about the period of that periodic error? Okay, so let me show you. Here we have the diagram of the right ascension axis in blue across like several hours. I don't remember, or an hour, or I don't remember exactly the timing, but you can see we have this like oscillations that are across a long period of time, and they're very easy, very smooth, and very easy to guide out. And overall, I measured something like you can expect over a given period of time, plus minus 40 arc seconds, which for a strain wave gear type of drive, so harmonic drive, is pretty much expected. That's exactly what you would expect. And for me, it is very smooth and it is very easy to guide out. It is also very periodic because when I did a frequency analysis of that, you can see I got 2 peaks of frequency on those, basically 360 seconds. And 720 seconds. And again, this is pretty much expected from such a strain wave gear type of mount. I have actually noticed that in PhD 2, if I enabled the predictive PEC or predictive PEC algorithm with a fixed period of 360 seconds, I got slightly better guiding results than without. So that was quite nice to see. And And to give you like the real world guiding results, you can see like the 360 seconds peak on this particular example where I have predictive PEC enabled, and we had something like 0.3 arc seconds, so 0.6 arc seconds peak to peak for the this particular spike. And as I recall, this was a night with not really good seeing. I was usually seeing better performance than this. And here is another example of a guide chart that I took as a screenshot because again, it is basically a beautiful guide log. And I believe it's actually took it just last night. Beautiful, beautiful guide log, and overall, very, very impressive mount. And this is basically the kind of results that I was getting continuously across the 2 weeks that I've been using this mount. It's just extremely consistent. I just haven't been able to use the mount on its basically maximum advertised payload without counterweight. But it's been a pleasure to use. The only frustrating things was the default options for the meridian window thing. So I really hope they change that so it doesn't harm new users of the mount, and that we have defaults that just like make sense for people using Nina or using SGP or using Voyager or using ASI Air or using StellarMate Pro. So if you're looking for a mount and you have some heavy equipment, or you're looking for a high quality mount that will have very reactive guiding and you want zero declination backlash, or you're looking for a mount that has zero slewing noise, like absolutely 100% silent, like pressing my ear on it, I don't hear anything. It's almost creepy, guys. But if you are looking for something like that, this might just be the mount for you. You just need to have the budget, the $3,000 budget available. But for a mount that can carry this capacity, that guides so well and so smoothly, and overall that just works, and that has like good polar alignment mechanics as far as I'm concerned, yeah, I think it's worth it. So will I buy this mount and will I keep using it? Well, I want to keep using it, so I'll keep using it probably until WarpAstron tells me like, hey, you may want to be sending it back now. We need it back, because I really like it. Obviously, it's kind of like overkill for my own setup because, full disclosure, my AM5 from ZW works very well with my telescope as it is. So there's no problem with my AM5, but it is definitely noisier. And yeah, so I'm just going to keep using this mount until I'm told to return it. But I have no need for the additional mount right now. So in the long term, I'll be going back to that AM5. But that's simply the only reason is because I don't need to carry 20 kilograms of equipment on my mount. That's the only reason, really. And so what are your thoughts on this? Let us know down in the comments, like the video, subscribe. I think it's the third time I say that in this video. I'm really sorry about that. So let's keep it short. Thank you so much for watching. Yeah, and thanks to my Patreon supporters, YouTube members, you make the channel possible. You guys will be in the credit after the end of this video. But more important than all of that, don't forget whenever you can to look up at the stars, and I'll see you next time.